You're coming back live with Real Talk with Herschel, WKCG 99.1 on your FM dial. Now, we're going to have a guest join us in just a second here. But before we do that, I just want to get the legalities out of the way once again. The views expressed today are those of me and my guest and my in-studio producer, and they do not necessarily reflect those of WKCG or TOPS. Now, today we have with us Dr. Derryn Moten, the chair and professor in the History Department of Alabama State University, the vice president of Alabama AFL-CIO, co-president of the American Federation of Teachers, and the vice chair of the AFT Higher Education Policy and Programming Planning Council. He joins Real Talk today to discuss the work of the late Dr. L.D. Reddick and the reprinting of the 1959's Crusaders Without Violence, the very first biography of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Moten, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. This is really great. I'm really excited about this, and I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Now, we're going to jump right in because I know you're a little pressed for time, or even if you're not, we can take this on until we finish. I want to start by asking you about the circumstances surrounding the release and re-release of Crusaders Without Violence.
Yes. Crusader Without Violence is the first biography written by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was literally written on the campus of Alabama State University. It was then known as Alabama State College. The author, or the biographer, was Dr. L.D. Reddick, Lawrence Dunbar Reddick. He was the chair of the history department at Alabama State College from 1955 to 1960. This is one of two biographies that was written while Dr. King was alive. This is the only biography written by someone who was an eyewitness to the Montgomery bus boycott, who was a member of Dexter Baptist Church when Dr. King pastored there, and someone who accompanied Dr. King not only to Ghana, but also to India, and also to Oslo when Dr. King received the Nobel Peace Prize. The other biography written of Dr. King while he was alive was written by his Morehouse College classmate, Lerone Bennett Jr., who sadly died February 14, 2018. That was entitled What Manner of Man? And so I am extremely happy and grateful that we were able to republish this book because of the importance of its association with Alabama State College. And I also wanted it published because a number of our students are unfamiliar with this book, and this is not unique to our students. I would say that there are a lot of people who are unfamiliar with this book. This book virtually went out of print in the 1980s, 1990s. So I'm grateful to Suzanne LaRosa and Randall Williams for working with us to have this book republished. It was no small feat, but we got it done.
Oh, okay. Now, I want to ask you another question about the book as well. Now, what was the state of Alabama's racial politics during the publication? And how connected was Dr. Reddick to Dr. King's life and political activities at the time? You know, were they very close?
Yes. And so, Alabama racial politics in the 1950s was, ugly doesn't even describe just how awful things were. White officials operated with impunity. They could arrest, they could jail, they could assault African Americans with no recourse. In terms of Dr. Reddick's relationship with Dr. King, I would say that they had a very close relationship. Dr. King asked the MIA board, the Montgomery Improvement Association board, to appoint Dr. Reddick as the chair of the history committee for the Montgomery Improvement Association. Dr. Reddick was also the head of, or the historian, excuse me, for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Dr. Reddick was very much a part of Dr. and Mrs. King's life, right up to Dr. King's assassination in 1968. And even after that, Mrs. King asked Dr. Reddick to serve on the original board for the King Center. So they remained lifelong friends.
Okay, so I guess that's the difference between most of the other biographies that were written about Dr. King. Dr. Reddick was actually a close friend of his.
Oh, extremely, yes. As a matter of fact, when they lived here in Montgomery, as I said, Dr. Reddick was even a member of Dexter Baptist Church during Dr. King's pastorate at that church.
Okay, well, let me ask you this as well. We were just talking about the racial politics. What about Governor Patterson? What kind of pressure did he put on Alabama State when Dr. Reddick during the 50s?
You know, Governor John Patterson was a formidable opponent. He was a known segregationist. You know, he had vowed to close Alabama's public schools before he allowed them to be integrated. He was part of the lawsuit, Sullivan versus New York Times. That was the famous libel lawsuit that was taken against Dr. King, Dr. Abernathy, and two other ministers, Reverend Say, and alleging that an ad taken out in the New York Times for Dr. King's legal defense had disparaged and had libeled Montgomery officials, including the governor. Governor Patterson was also the person who ordered Dr. King to stand trial, or I should say, facilitated the order for Dr. King to stand trial for tax fraud in 1960. This was the first time in Alabama state history that a person had been charged with tax fraud, and miraculously, Dr. King was acquitted by an all-white male jury of those charges. Governor Patterson, prior to being the governor, was the state attorney general, and he was the state attorney general that banned the operation of the NAACP in the state of Alabama. He alleged that it was a foreign organization. In reality, what Governor Patterson wanted was a membership role for the NAACP. Governor Patterson used all his legal skills to make life miserable for not only Dr. King but other civil rights leaders.
Wow. This is a very interesting book, and I'd like to ask you, Crusader Without Violence offers a very human and very relatable portrait of Dr. King. Discussing his preferences in drink and how he dressed, his love of food, his sense of humor, how he met his wife, how he was able to to situate herself as a young new minister and establish a church. What does this humanization offer to our understanding of Dr. King?
Well, it makes him a real person. When you consider how young Dr. King was when he came to Montgomery in 1954, when you consider how young he was when he became one of the leaders and the spokesperson for the Montgomery Gulf Boys House, when you consider that he was the youngest person to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. King was a special individual. And when you consider that he was the pastor of Dexter Baptist Church at the tender age that he was, and he replaced someone who was a sort of a theological giant, and that was Dr. Vernon John. And so, we get to see Dr. King as he was in flesh and blood. And the other thing that I appreciate about his biography, I appreciate the fact that Dr. Reddick describes how the black community in Montgomery enveloped the King family. And even though Dr. King was from outside of Montgomery, did not grow up in Montgomery, had no ties to Montgomery, Mrs. King grew up in Marion, Alabama, graduated from Lincoln High School in Marion, Alabama, which, by the way, is the birthplace for Alabama State College. And what I like to say when I talk about this is that Alabama State University knew Mrs. King than Coretta Scott before Dr. King knew her. And so I just like how this story connects Dr. King with so many other important places and events in the history, the African American history of Alabama in the 20th century, particularly the civil rights history of Alabama in the 20th century.
All right. My producer here, Antoine, has a question for you, Dr. Moten.
How are you, Dr. Moten? There's a beautiful quote in the book where, after listing the giants in the Montgomery Improvement Organization like E.D. Nixon, Ralph Abernathy, Joanne Robinson, and Fred Gray, the quote says, and thus Martin Luther King did not operate in a leadership vacuum. He was aided and abetted on all sides, surrounded and supported and reinforced. Collective action resulted from collective thought, end quote. My question is this, what did Dr. King contribute to such a talented assortment of black people, and how should our discussions of King contextualize his importance while also not overshadowing others in the movement whose success he contributed to?
Yeah, certainly Dr. King was one of many leaders, and as other historians have written, the Montgomery Bus Boycott was really large, or I should say largely, the idea and the manifestation of the Women's Political Council. Joy Robinson was the president of the Women's Political Council at the outbreak, or I should say at the beginning of the Montgomery Bus Boycott. What Dr. King, I think, brought to the table is that Dr. King was very well trained, and I don't mean trained in a pejorative sense. He was very well educated, and so he was not only a good preacher, but he was also a good spokesperson for the movement. And when my family and I moved to Montgomery in 1996, the deacon, Deacon Reddick, who recruited Dr. King to Dexter, was at the church when my family and I visited Dexter King Memorial Baptist Church for the first time. And when he welcomed us into the building, he took us up to the sanctuary, and we sat on the front pew of the sanctuary, and he got so excited when he talked about Dr. King that he sat on the edge of the pew, and this man was probably in his 80s at the time. And he said to us, you just had to hear him preach. And my mother-in-law heard Dr. King preach when she was a young college student in West Virginia. And she said the same thing, or said the same thing, you just had to hear him preach. There were a lot of good preachers around during the time of Dr. King. But Dr. King had something special. I think it had everything to do with the community that he was brought up in. I think it had everything to do with the friendships that his father and his mother had formed with other notable persons. I do think that Benjamin Elijah made a huge impression on Dr. King. But I also think that the folks here in Montgomery made a huge impression on Dr. King. People like Mary Fairburn, Joanne Robinson, E.B. Nixon, Mrs. Rosa Parks, and many, many others. I mean, Dr. King did not put on airs. And I think people appreciated that. And I think some people were a little apprehensive about him because he had a Boston PhD. But Dr. King really did want to improve things in Montgomery, but not just in Montgomery. I think he wanted to improve the racial situation in the United States. And I mean, consider what the political landscape looked like in the 1950s and the 1960s. I mean, any betting person would have easily betted against the success of the Montgomery bus boycott. Right. Easily. Wow. And yes, that community coalesced around Dr. King and other boycott leaders, and were successful in 13 months. The speech that Dr. King gave at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March is one of my favorite speeches. And it's one of my favorite speeches because Dr. King said to us, he said, no lie lives forever. And I agree with that. Right. And he also said, truth pressed the earth will rise again. And I agree with that. And he also said, or quoted several stanzas from the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which is the anthem that Union soldiers sang when they captured Confederate cities. And Dr. King knew he was in the capital of the Confederacy. Right. Because he said, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And they're trampling out the fences where the grapes of wrath are stored. And Dr. King was saying to Governor Wallace, you're going to lose this war, just like the South lost the Civil War.
Wow.
I also wanted to ask you, you noted earlier that Dr. King had traveled to India, and I just wanted you to talk a little about what Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence was inspired by. And just as an extension of your previous answer, I also kind of want you to talk a little bit about the I don't want to say friction, but the kind of the multiplicity of influences that he had. He was influenced not just by, he was also influenced by Lincoln and Denmark Vesey and Marcus Garvey as well. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, please.
Well, right. Dr. King, I should say, his understanding and his appreciation of nonviolent protest and passive resistance evolved. He learned about it while he was a student at Morehouse, when speakers like Dr. Mordecai Johnson came to speak, speakers like Dr. Howard Thurman came to speak, and of course, he had there at Morehouse Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. But he also learned from people like, organizations like the Fellowship of Reconciliation. He also learned from individuals like Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph. And so Dr. King is, what I love about Dr. King is that he epitomized the beauty and the boundlessness of African American culture, because I think he borrowed from many thinkers, and he named some of those thinkers, and we know that these thinkers influenced him because many times when Dr. King spoke, even when he preached, he spoke extemporaneously. And it's just amazing to go back and listen to his sermons and his public speeches and see how he weaves all these strands of history together and to tell or to make a compelling argument or to tell a compelling story. He really was a great rhetorician in that regard.
Now, one thing I also want to talk about, you said that he drew from multiple sources, and there's an interesting part in the book where he talks about his relationship to capitalism and to communism. And I want you to talk a little bit about how his association with people like Bayard Rustin and his wide traveled experiences affected his view of economics and how America, as a vast ocean of material prosperity, how it should treat its own poor.
Yeah, I think what bothered Dr. King about capitalism was the emphasis on profit and the profit motive, and Dr. King was a vocal opponent against communism because he didn't think that the state should run everything in the government, and he also didn't believe that capitalism for the sake of capitalism was necessarily a good thing, particularly if it was the emphasis of what sort of drove capitalism was profit over people. That's why he came out, or one of the reasons why he came out against the Vietnam War, because he talked about militarism and the folly of spending millions and millions of dollars to fill farms when people literally were starving here in America. And he wasn't the only person who sort of evolved and began to sort of gainsay capitalism. I find it remarkable that at the time that Dr. King was killed, and at the time that Malcolm X was killed, in terms of their views towards capitalism, their views were very similar. Because Dr. King said, and I'm paraphrasing, what good does it do to pass laws to give a man or allow a black man to sit at a lunch counter if he does not have the means to order a hamburger and a Coke. That's right. And Dr. King sadly was killed before he was able to see the fruition of a poor people's campaign, and Reverend Barber has taken up the mantle. That's right. Because Reverend Barber said just last weekend on Reverend Al Sharpton's show, or I believe it was A.M. Joy's show, or A.M. Joy, the show A.M. Joy, that 43% of Americans today are impoverished. 43%. And this is in the wealthiest nation in the world. That's right. That's right.
One thing I also want to talk about, one thing that surprised me about the book was that King had a very close relationship with African figures like Kwame Nkrumah. He actually went to Ghana and met with him after they had declared independence, were able to successfully get it. So can you talk a little bit about how decolonization movements in Africa influenced King's efforts to combat Jim Crow here?
Yeah, because I think, Dr. King, he never referred to himself as a Pan-African, but I certainly think that he had Pan-Africanist tendencies.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
And I believe that colonialism was akin to Jim Crow, and that the freedom of Africans was part and parcel with the freedom of African Americans and the freedom of marginalized and disenfranchised people of African descent all over the world.
All right. Now, I'm going to wind this down a little bit before we get into some other things. But I want to ask you one more thing about this book here. What lesson does this biography and King's work into Montgomery boycott provide that anti-racist organizations today should internalize and adopt for themselves?
Okay, so I think one of the lessons that we can draw from this book is that the success of the Montgomery boycott did not happen by serendipity. These folks strategized. They were organized. There was a reason why they had those weekly mass meetings. And I think that anyone who is interested in doing this work today should understand that you have to be organized. You have to strategize. You have to be strategic. And it doesn't happen overnight. I don't think that Dr. King or any of the other boycott leaders foresaw that the boycott would last 13 months. But, I believe they would have gone 26 months if necessary. Their goal was to end segregation. And so, I think if, in these struggles, particularly, when you're struggling against the powerful and the mighty and the wealthy, you have to be prepared to be in it for the long run. One of my favorite quotes by Malcolm X is that Malcolm X once said, "There's no such thing as a bloodless revolution."
Exactly.
It's a quote that to my students, not because I'm advocating bloodshed, but Malcolm X made it plain. If you're going to engage in a revolution, there will be some bloodshed.
If you want success. Now, since we're going to keep it in the same vein, let me ask you, Dr. Moten, since we're talking about capitalism and things of that nature, what are your views on reparations? It's a big discussion right now amongst the candidates, and we have some pushback from some of our brothers. I'll say it like that. What are your views on reparations?
And what were Dr. King's views?
Right, exactly, yeah. On reparations.
The last question is really tough. I don't know, because I don't know that Dr. King ever talked about reparations. He did talk about the fact that African Americans never received their fair share, never received what their due. But my own personal feelings about reparations is that I'm for reparations per se, but I'll be honest with you. I don't think that Congress nor the President is going to open up the U.S. Treasury and just start doling out money to folks. And I'm not trying to be flippant in saying that. All I'm saying is that I think if we're talking about reparations, we have to talk about concrete ways or how that would look. And so for me, since I teach at a university, and a historically black university, I'd like to see students who attend HBCU to receive, a free college degree, so that they could attend these 106 institutions tuition free. That's a start. I'd like to see, low interest or zero interest home loans, so that African Americans can purchase homes. One of the things that concerns me is that there are fewer African American homeowners today than there were 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And it is still true in the United States that the single largest investment that most Americans have is their home.
Yes.
And so when you compare personal wealth of the black middle class vis-a-vis the white middle class, it pales in comparison. That is, the wealth of the white middle class is so significant, or so much larger than the wealth of the black middle class. And home ownership is a means by which many people became middle class.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have one question for you about the current moment that we're in, just kind of changing topics a little bit. As a historian, I'm curious about what your reaction is to the I suppose I'll say to the rediscovery and the re-mention of certain segregationist figures like James O. Eastland.
Yeah, I think, to use the expression from the barber shop, I think former Vice President Joe Biden stepped in. There's no way you can joke about black men being called forward.
That's right.
That's right.
There's just no way you can joke about that. And I would have thought that Vice President Biden would have been sensitive enough to understand that. And it's clear to me that that wasn't sort of like a Freudian slip, because he said, they called me son, not boy.
Right.
Right.
He was making the distinction as a white man. He was not referred to as a boy.
Yes, sir.
And going back to Dr. King, that story he tells about he and his dad.
That's right.
In the department store.
That's right.
No, excuse me. The police officer pulled him over for some traffic violation or supposed traffic violation. And he referred to Daddy King as boy. And Daddy King became indignant and pointed to his son, Martin Luther Jr., and said, that's a boy. I'm a man.
That's right.
And so I don't think any person, and particularly someone like Vice President Joe Biden, should not understand that you don't joke about black men being called boys. Now, in terms of Senator Eastland and Strom Thurmond and all those folks, I don't know if they, espoused the views that they did because of political expediency. I don't know if they were really racist. But to quote a line from Andrew Gillum, the former mayor of Tallahassee, the racists thought they were racist. So, if the racists thought they were racist, then what am I to say? If you act like a racist, you talk like a racist, you govern like a racist, then what are you?
That's right. That's right.
Dr. Maya Angelou told us, if a person shows you who she or he really is, believe them.
That's right.
And so I know that these folks Vice President Biden refers to supported legislation, offered legislation, voted against bills that harm people. I know that. And so I don't know what was in their heart. I don't know if they ever, sort of reconciled. But I know what the effect of the legislation that they supported and introduced and voted against did for the lives of countless black people in this country.
That's right. And one other question I have for you, and I'll try to shut up after this, but the other question that I have for you is what does reconciliation look like out of a circumstance where Dixiecrats became Democrats and we never actually had a conversation that fully condemned what Dixiecrats stood for? We just kind of assumed that the Dixiecrat strain had died off. What does reconciliation look like in a context like that? And what does accountability look like for a politician like Joe Biden that not only operated with them, but also wrote anti-busing legislation with people like Jesse Helms?
Right. Well, to me, it's not about words; it's about deeds.
Yes, right.
And so, I'm all for saying I'm sorry, but we need more than I'm sorry.
Amen.
And so, we've never fully reconciled the history of enslavement in this country or racism in this country. And when I talk about racism with my classes, I have them to look up the word because I wanted to know that racism means more than just bigotry.
That's right.
Racism is this idea, this mentality that race accounts for differences in people's ability, behavior, and character. And as Chris Rock once joked, white boys don't want to be me, and I'm rich. This whole idea that just because you have white skin, that you are superior and supreme to people who don't have white skin. I don't know that we will ever be able to eradicate that, but reconciliation has to be, or I should say the eradication of white supremacist thought and thinking has to be a part of what reconciliation looks like. We can't have a president who says in the wake of what happened in Charlottesville that there were good people on both sides. Excuse me?
Yeah.
And we also cannot have a president who says about Mexican men that they're coming over here to rape our women.
Right. That's right.
And as I said to my female students, with all due respect, I don't think he was talking about you.
Yeah. Because he wouldn't care. If he did, he wouldn't have said it.
Right.
You've been listening to, Dr. Derryn Moten, discussing the revival of L.D. Reddick's biography, Crusader Without Violence. Now, Dr. Moten, I thank you so much for calling in and discussing some other topics as well. We're frequently up at ASU.
Yeah, come visit us.
So we may have to...
Have your show on our campus.
Well, you know what? You heard it live here. Dr. Moten invited us up. Now, we will hold you to that, Dr. Moten.
I'm sincere. Come to our campus. Absolutely.
Okay, because like I said, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day, because what we're here to do is uplift our community, to reinvigorate our community, to re-educate our community, and to realize that even though we have different views, our goals are the same, and we have to learn to work together in spite of our differences.
Yeah. Hey, can I say one last?
Sure, say anything you like, Dr. Moten.
Yeah. We have to, in my humble opinion, get young folks to understand that their vote is absolutely critical. I cannot overestimate the importance of young people voting. When someone says to me, and I don't hear this often, my vote does not count in Alabama. I say to them in retort, we elect judges in Alabama from the traffic court to the Supreme Court. If you've ever been in a courtroom in any county, in any city in Alabama, describe the people in the orange jumpsuit. Describe the folks behind the bench. Describe the folks who are at the table, that is the lawyer table. Voting is absolutely crucial, and we celebrate the Selma to Montgomery March, and we should celebrate it every March. But we have to have young people to understand the power in their vote. And, this 2020 election, and I know we say this a lot, but this may be the most important election in our lifetime.
Yeah, it's definitely a turning point. Dr. Moten, I'm going to ask you to hold on for me for just a second.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, you've been listening to Real Talk with Herschel, Dr. Derryn Moten, who's reviving Dr. Reddick's book, Crusader Without Violence. We're going to take a little music break, say goodbye to Dr. Moten, and come back and finish our show.